Teach us to be ever present and aware of your voice in the wind. Show us your handiwork in the waves of the ocean. May we be always alert to your presence in our lives. Amen. I think I may have told you about my great-grandmother before, but her name was Emma Decker. She lived on this earth for 96 years. By the time I knew her, her life was pretty well contained on the second of family farms. And when you take her life as a whole, she has much to teach me, and I suspect all of us. In the late 1800s, she crossed the mountains between Pennsylvania and southern Indiana in a covered wagon. She and her husband, Valentine Foy Decker, homesteaded the multi-acre family farm. I remember that farm well. There were hills. We thought they were mountains because we were this high. There were hills to climb and streams to play in, and they were called creeks in southern Indiana. I guess Mary knows exactly what I'm talking about. There was this magical, unexplained spring that we dubbed the Indian Springs, and we spun yarns to make it all seem pretty exciting. I tell you all these things so that you can understand what this farm meant to my great-grandmother and to the subsequent generations as well. Her life is a timeline of all the changes in the 20th century. She saw the development of virtually all the inventions that changed this country from an agrarian society to one centered in big cities. She also lived to see Neil Armstrong walk on the moon. Think of the paradigm shifts that she and all of your grandparents and great-grandparents experienced. I bring my great-grandmother up because her generation and the generation that followed it were experts in paradigm shifting. That is, changing one's worldview or ideas about how the world operates and how you operate in the world. With each new life-changing invention, they shifted and survived. There was little question about whether or not they could or would be willing to change. If they wanted to live in the present, they changed. We may want to remember that as we envision a church for today. I wish I'd been old enough or wise enough to ask my great-grandmother what it was like to make all these changes, to go with the flow, so to speak, though she would not have understood that phrase at all. There is one very sad story in my great-grandmother's life. In the late 1960s, the county decided to put in a human-made water reservoir. You guessed it. Her farm, along with the farms of all of her neighbors, were taken for not much money, and eventually most of her farm, including the homesteaded farmhouse, were underwater. Everyone in the midst of their own grief and anger seemed to be sure that this would kill Emma. It will not surprise you to hear that it did not. She moved into the house they were able to purchase and lived there another 10 years or so. She experienced the loss deeply, I am sure, but killed her, it did not. I am grateful that I was given an amazing mentor in the art of living with change, and I'm sure that all of you have similar stories that you could tell. In the church growth movement, everyone wants to talk about the paradigm shift that we must choose to make. A paradigm shift is really no more than changing the models of how one views the world, including values, lifestyles, traditions, religion, and spirituality. When we here at Open Circle talk about radical We are talking about being able to let go of some of our models that we have for doing church, or at least change them, and our theology or understanding of the nature of God. It does not mean, as one of you asked me this week, giving up your story, your God, your values, or your spirituality. What it does mean is that your model should not and cannot be declared to be the truth. It may be your truth, and no one is advocating that you relinquish your truth. That would make you less than authentic. And in maintaining your authenticity, you allow others to maintain theirs. Radical inclusivity has as its core the principle of respect for others and for ourselves. There is more, however. This means learning the art of listening rather than speaking. It means listening without judging. For some of you, Jesus is at the center of your spirituality. However, I've heard some of you say, Jesus just doesn't do it for me. Radical inclusivity says that's okay. We can reach out to each other and love and accept each other in the source of all love, the divine. What you need to know in order to be comfortable in a community of radical inclusivity is that another's spiritual belief system or their spiritual paradigm belongs to them as it has grown out of their life experiences. Yours belongs to you, is sacred to you. Celebrate that. Honor it. In fact, down the road, you may find that others bring marvelous variations of faith or spiritual practices, and they bring those with them into a radically inclusive community, rather than fear those variations. You may look at the different ways that they may teach you to experience your own spirituality in new and wonderful ways. I can almost guarantee you that learning about other faiths and traditions will enhance your current spiritual practices rather than threaten or lessen them. We have much to learn, and much of what we have to learn comes from peoples and places other than Christianity. We can all sit together as people who exist in the same pool of divine love. Let's try it. I want you to turn to your neighbors, both on the left and right sides. This is why you might want to consider sitting closer together. And I want you to say to each one of them, and this is all I want you to say. I honor your spiritual journey and where you are in the present. Will you give that a try? That's all there is to it. Don't ask them what they believe. You didn't have time, and we don't have time. You don't need to know what they believe in order to honor and respect them as brother and sister seekers of truth and love. How did that feel? How did you feel when someone told you that they honored your journey? And the opposite. How did you feel when you told them that you honored theirs? This is it. we just experienced radical inclusivity. Some of you may be thinking, well, that wasn't hard. We're all basically the same. I would suggest that not only is that not accurate, many have chosen not to share their truths with us because we have not yet fully committed to Open Circle being the kind of beautiful place that everyone experiences enough acceptance to enable them to feel safe. This causes me sadness. Let me give you some examples. If this fits you, please know that I am not condemning you, but I am asking that you take some time later today and ask yourself if this is true for you. If you have ever asked someone why they don't partake of communion or why they don't join this church, you may have a ways to go to understand radical inclusivity. There are many other things we do and don't do which lets us know that we are falling short of an inclusivity which builds trust between us and those who bring different stories with them. The title of this sermon is Melting Models, not tearing down models or destroying models of tradition or spirituality. What happens when you light a candle? Beyond the obvious flame, there is also the melting or the softening of the paraffin or beeswax, which supports the wick. Wicks, you will realize, cannot stand up by themselves. We naturally have core beliefs that hold up our other beliefs, but the model of a burning candle is an apt one. As the candle burns, we, being the paraffin, soften. We change shapes. We send down long expressions of melting wax, which serve many times to build up and rebuild the candle itself. This is what it means to be radically inclusive, that we allow our light, the flame of the candle, to not only show light to others, but to melt our edges and make it easier for others to be accepted into our lives and for us to lovingly encourage one another as our edges melt and we become more and more open to experiencing the love of God and those with whom we may have theological differences. When we think in terms of softening our edges rather than changing who we are, we may have an easier time understanding this thing called radical inclusivity. Rather than abrupt change, it is a subtle softening and reshaping. We are drawn towards this metaphor of the burning candle because we are more able to think of the small, slow change in the body as the wick burns. Will you not share the light of your candle and invite others, though different from you, to share theirs? Come feel the passion and warmth of shared experiences in mutuality. Loving each other enough to hear another's story is all that it takes. Loving, calling, being true to ourselves while embracing each other and those who are not currently among the each others of Open Circle. If we are to heal the world, we must heal each other first. Once we have reached out to those both like and unlike us, we are well on our